Good day, everyone, and welcome to the fiscal year 24 CSBG Annual Report webinar series, Using State Systems for Reporting. This is the 6th webinar in the series and the first webinar that focuses on leveraging systems and tools for annual report submissions. This webinar is to provide support and updates to CSBG grant recipients who use a state database or to collect data for the CSBG Annual Report, and then use that state database or system to export the data to XMLs. If you are in the process of building a system, then you may want to stay on to listen as well. If you use smart forms, a webinar focused on the use of smart forms is this Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you use a mix of a system and a smart form, you're welcome to stay as well. I am Monique Alcantara. I am a management analyst and the data and evaluation specialist for regions 4, 6, and 7. I would also like to extend our welcome from our leadership team in the Office of Community Services. I am joined today by Tiffany Jarvis, the Research Director from the National Association of State Community Services Programs, or NASCAS. Today, we will review common definitions. Then we will go over the process, which should be a refresher if you have joined the other webinars. Then we'll dive into XMLs and common issues that we saw during the fiscal year 23 Federal Quality Assurance Review, or the FQAR. Some of these common issues will be familiar from last year's webinar. As they remain common during the fiscal year 23 FQAR, we chose to review them again. Then we will discuss revisions for the fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. As noted in prior webinars, we are using the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB approved CSBG Annual Report version 2.1. There were very minor changes, with the biggest being the transition to UEI, which was implemented in fiscal year 23. These revisions are more so focused on updates to the FQAR based on the fiscal year 23 review and feedback that we received. Then we will give an overview of the vendor portal and documents are available to you to support your system. Then we'll discuss available resources and provide some reminders. Again, we will have a survey at the end, as we have done with previous webinars. We request that you stay on. Your feedback is crucial to ensuring future webinars are beneficial to you. And then we will have time for Q&A. So let's dive into some common definitions to provide clarity for the rest of the webinar and to ensure that we are on the same page. In some cases, states use both smart forms and a state database. For the purpose of this webinar, a state database or system is referred to a vendor or state built or designed database from which the data is directly exported to an XML. If you are a state that uses a state database or system to collect the data, but then transfer that data to a smart form, this webinar may be still useful to you. However, the focus will be on validations that can be built into the database so that the state can check for common issues or illogical errors prior to exporting the data to the XML and then uploading to the online data collection system, or OLDC. If you transfer your data from your state database or system to a smart form and you are able to build in validations before that transfer, we do recommend that you do so. Then the validations built into the smart form would serve as a second check. An XML, or an extendable markup language, essentially stores the data from the state database or system in a file that OLDC can read. The XML has defined fields with specific names in a specific order. So it's important that you use the XML that we define, which Tiffany will go over later in this webinar. Validations are a set of written rules that check the validity and accuracy of each data point. These validations are built into the smart forms. So again, if you're transferring data from your database or system to a smart form, you do not necessarily need to build these validations into your system. However, if you export the data from your database or system directly to the XML, while it is not required, we strongly recommend that you build in these validations. These validations allow for a smoother FQAR, as there are likely to be less comments in review. A quick review of reporting requirements. These should be familiar as they have been discussed in previous webinars from this series. The annual report is a requirement born out of the statutory authorities, specifically the CSBG Act. Among other things, grant recipients should be submitting their reports annually where they capture measured performance of the eligible entities, accounting of funds spent on administrative costs by eligible entities, direct service delivery, number and characteristics of participants served. During the kickoff webinar, Manette gave an overview of the fiscal year 24 CSBG Annual Report process. As a reminder, all agencies that received fiscal year 23 funding must submit modules 2 and 4. I will not go over the full process, rather I'll focus on the first two steps of the process. First, the role of our states and territories with subrecipients. It is absolutely critical that grant recipients are reviewing the data submitted by local agencies prior to submitting to OCS. This is an opportune time to check for errors, warnings, and the holistic validity of the data. The grant recipient then submits the complete report and OLDC. A complete report includes modules 1, 2, and 4. Module 3 remains optional. This should also be familiar from the Collecting Individual and Family Characteristics or Module 4 webinar. Today's webinar is focused on the state database. And I'll emphasize again the critical role that states and territories play in reviewing the data that you see. On December 9th, we'll discuss the XML export, the OLDC upload, and submitting the data to OCS. Once the data is submitted to OCS, we will begin the annual report review. But again, today's webinar is focused on the state database and providing guidance to you to build a system that allows for some validity checks prior to your submission to OCS. During each of our webinars, we often use the phrase a complete submission. And I want to reiterate what a complete submission is, specifically for modules 2 and 4, as it directly relates to the data that's submitted through the state database. All entities that received fiscal year 23 funding must submit modules 2 and 4. As a rule of thumb, if the entity is reported in the state plan, it must be reflected in the annual report in some way. Additionally, if the entity received and expended any funding between October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024, they must submit a report. We understand that there could be changes such as a de-designation or voluntary relinquishment after submitting the CSBG state plan, but the entity should still report if it received and expended funds during the fiscal year. We understand that XML sometimes could fail in OLDC. So please check the status of each XML submission in OLDC to ensure that everything uploaded correctly. Again, we'll go over this in more detail on December 9th. If you experience any issues, please email your data and evaluation specialist, and they will be able to assist you. If there are any comments clarifying your data, please attach the comment template in OLDC. Use your best judgment when it comes to a comment template. Comment on items that you anticipate to appear on the review memo or you think are important for us to know. Your data and evaluation specialist will share all resources with you, including comment template. And we'll also go over the comment template more during the December 5th webinar. After all XMLs are successfully uploaded and you attach the comment template, if you use one, do not forget to submit the state level. Our ability to release review memos and move forward data mitigation, closeout, and further national reporting depends on the timely submission and completion of the fiscal year 24 CSBG Annual Report. Just a bit more general information. There must be a separate XML uploaded for each entity and for each module. Module 3 should be attached as a smart form. We've had instances where a PDF was attached, but please submit the smart form. No need to take an extra step. If the entity does not have any transformations to report, please do not submit anything. Before we dive into the common issues, just some final key reminders. The CSBG lead agency must upload the XML to OLDC. Vendors do not have access. Additionally, data cannot be transferred directly from a state database to OLDC. You must export the data to an XML and then upload to OLDC. A quick knowledge pop. What is a complete submission of modules 2 and 4? Remember, this is specific to modules 2 and 4 and not the full report. So we ask that you answer in the chat. Upload, option A, upload of XMLs for current CSBG eligible entities. Option B, upload of XMLs for all CSBG eligible entities that receive funding in fiscal year 24 for both modules 2 and 4. Option C, upload of XMLs for CSBG eligible entities that submitted their data on time. And option D, submission of the state level form for both modules 2 and 4. As a hint, there may be more than one answer. So we'll give you time to answer in the chat, and then we'll share the answer. I think we have some shy participants today. But thank you for the answer. Oh, there we go. A few more coming in. So if you answered B and D, or if you were thinking B and D, that is correct. Upload of XMLs for all CSBG eligible entities that received funding in fiscal year 24 for both modules 2 and 4, and the submission of a state level form for both modules 2 and 4. Tiffany will now go over XMLs and common issues. Rules or validations can be written into your state database or system to avoid some of these issues. Tiffany?
Sorry, I thought I turned on my video, but it hadn't come on yet. Okay. So we are sharing this, we are aware that the screenshot we are sharing right now, the text is very small, but we just wanted to provide you with a visual for what so you can get a sense of what it looks like. The FY24 XML files on NASCA's web vendor portal provides you with a full-size document. So there are some examples of full-size documents that you can look at later. There are 3 parts of the XML file. First is the module identification, which is listed either as CSBG_M2 or CSBG M4_M4. This tells the system, OLDC, what is the module is being reported on. There are also 9 header fields, which we also refer to as additional fields. These are also important because it tells OLDC where to route the file. Please refer to the FY24 additional fields document that's found on NASCAS's vendor portal, which we'll talk about a little bit later today, as it lists what these 9 additional header fields should be. It is important to note that the XML file must match exactly what is listed on this document. I also wanted to point out a couple of other fields on this document. The first one is state name. It is listed, but it is not included on the XML. We've only included it on the additional fields document for grouping purposes. But there is another field on it that's called subgrantee. This is not a new field, even though it was not included previously. What we realized was it was not included on the additional fields document, and so we added it this year. And as just a reminder, this field should always be 1 on the XML file. The other key part is the data fields. These are the data points for the particular module that an agency may be reporting on, such as the number of volunteer hours donated, the number of individuals achieving an NPI, or the number of individuals served. The agency is required to submit 2 files, one for Module 2 and one for Module 4. The XML name for each module must be listed as it is on the screen for all agencies. When you get into the vendor portal, you will also be able to see this information as well after this webinar. So it's important to note that the exact language, as you see here, or on the XML schema files on the vendor portal, will be exactly how you have it out of the state system. This is the name for each agency that's reporting. Again, the name must match exactly what is on the FY24 additional fields document, as this is what is in OLDC. So this is the second year that the UEI is used instead of DUNS. The number is specific to each agency. Now, it's important to note that the UEI must also match exactly what's on the FY24 additional fields document, as this is what is in OLDC. There have been a few times during the FY23 reporting period when we first went to the UEI where the UEI had a typo. For example, there were instances in which the number 5 was mistakenly typed as the letter S. So for successful OLDC uploading, it is important that there are no typos in the UEI. I want you to also note that an agency may have a different UEI than what it had originally if it had to recertify. It's important that the original UEI, the one that is listed on the additional fields file be on the XML file, because this is what is in OLDC, not the new UEI. So reporting is based on the federal fiscal year, which may not be the same reporting period an agency selects under Module 2A1. The date must be formatted as a 4-digit year, -2-digit month, including the leading 0, if applicable, -2-digit date, including the leading 0. Since this report is for FY24, the start date would be listed as 2023-10-01, and the end date would be listed as 2024-09-30. All XML fields must be listed with the correct name and in the correct order. As we talked about previously, there is an XML schema file for each module under the vendor portal, because we realize that this screenshot is very small, but if you go to the vendor portal, you will actually get a full-size version of this. And like I said, it has to be exactly the same name and in the exact same order. Just a reminder, we're going to talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, but there is a data dictionary that can be found under the vendor portal. Besides the correct name and order, as is on the XML file, this document provides additional information such as type of field, if a null value is allowed, and the validation requirements. So that document will also be helpful. There are 5 special characteristics that must be converted for proper reading by OLDC. There are 2 that are more common, which are the ampersand and the apostrophe. It is important that these are listed on the XML file using the and the and apos respectively. Less than, more than, and quotations will be less commonly used, but are required to be converted as they are listed on the slide. They are used. And I believe I'm now turning it back over to Monique.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'm going to quickly go over some annual report revisions. As I noted earlier, their 2.1, for the most part, does remain the same as 2.0, which was used for fiscal year 23. OCS received clearance for the CSBG Annual Report version 2.1, which will be used for fiscal year 24 reporting. States should update their databases or systems to match the front-facing as well as the back end or the XML to align with OMB approved form. So those were those additional fields that Tiffany was referring to, ensuring that those two match. States should update their databases. Additionally, Tiffany will discuss the validations that we highly recommend building into your state database if you are able. However, it is important to note that not all of these are programmed into the smart. One quick reminder before we jump into the validations, the CSBG Annual Report is due on March 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time in Grad Solutions. In prior years, the annual report also included reports for CARES and or disaster funding. These are no longer included as CARES and disaster supplementals have been expended. Please also note that fiscal year 24 annual report does not include the proposed changes of annual report 3.0. Now, Tiffany will review validations. Again, the majority of these validations are written into the smart forms, and we highly recommend the states in these validations add these validations to your system or database as well. If you are unable to add the validation, we do suggest that you build in time to do a manual check prior to submitting to OCS, as this will smoothen the FQAR. These are validations or checks that we recommend you build in that check between modules. These are not built into the smart form as they are separate forms. But if you are able to build them into your system, we recommend that you do.
Okay, so the validations are very important to ensure that the agency is reporting correctly. So we have common validation categories, and those include year-to-year comparisons, auto calculations, alignments between data points such as age, and also subsets and complete responses. It is important to note that these kind of all have different kind of logics, and so we're going to go through a couple of examples later. And so we're not going to discuss all of the validations today, but there will be a complete list of them under NASCAS's vendor portal. In previous years, there was a validation check based on the agency's targeting under Module 4, Section A. This included if the agency was within the 80 and 120% performance range, and if there was a 100% achieved rate. These are no longer included during the quality assurance review process. However, the year-to-year checks, such as the agency did not report on the data point in FY23, but is reporting in FY24, are still in place. A full list of the year-to-year validations are listed on the validations document under the vendor portal. There are some data points that are sums of others, and it is highly recommended that these be built into a state system for reporting accuracy. The data points under Module 2 that should be auto-calculated are listed here on this slide. All calculations are based on prior data points, and the data dictionary provides information about what the data points are that are added together to come up with the auto-calculated number. Here is an example of an auto-calculated number. C3B13 is an auto sum of the little 1 through 4 above. While not on the screen, this auto calculation logic also applies to C3N and C4O. One issue that has been seen in previous years is that there's nothing being reported under the little 1 through little 4, but there is an auto calculated number. Another issue that has been seen is the amounts reported under the little 1s through little 4s do not add up together to match the auto-calculated number. This may be because the state system allows for up to 10 entries, but OLDC only allows for 4. So for reporting accuracy, it's highly recommended that the state system be programmed to only allow 4 other entries as it is in OLDC. When considering columns 4 and 5 under Module 4, Section A, remember that these are percentages, not sums. Column 4 uses column 3. The formula is column 3 divided by column 4, and column 5 uses a column 3 divided by column 2 formula for the auto calculations. Most individual level characteristics have auto-calculated totals. For example, gender total, or C1E, is a sum of C1A through C1D. Additionally, several of these totals should equal what is being reported under item A, the unduplicated number of individuals. Please note that while 5A and 5B do not have totals, the yes, no, and unknown not reported options under these should aggregate together and equal item A. There are a few exceptions as they are specific to an age range. These include the data points listed on the slide. Additionally, C5C9 health insurance sources is also an exception, but it ties to the yes number reported under C5B rather than an age like the other ones do. Similar to the individual characteristics, most household level ones have totals that should equal the prior data points, such as D9J household type total should equal the sum of D9A through D9I. Also, these totals should equal what is reported under item B, unduplicated number of households reported. There are 2 exceptions, D14, other income sources, and D15, non-cash benefits. As mentioned during the previous slide, most of the individual and household level totals should equal what is reported under items A and B. Unknown and not reported is an important element to make sure that this happens, as not all characteristics are obtained for each client. But simply put, the known characteristics, such as male, female, and other, for a specific demographic category are added together and subtracted from either item A or item B. And what remains is what should be reported under unknown, not reported. Some individual level characteristics refer to a specific age. Education levels is one example where it asks for those that are aged 14 to 17 and those that are aged 18 plus. Rather than comparing the totals to item A, these are actually compared to the sum of the individuals reported under the specified age range. For example, the total under 3I, ages 14 through 24, should equal the sum of what is being reported under 2C and 2D. Disconnected youth, or 4A, is specifically looking at those individuals who are aged 14 to 24. Now, unlike most other data points under the All Characteristics Report, this one uses a cannot exceed logic rather than a should equal logic. So it's expected that 4A will not exceed the sum of 2C and 2D, and most likely will be less. Military status, or 7E, is specifically looking at only those individuals who are aged 18 plus and should equal the sum of 2D through 2J. Work status, or 8I, is specifically looking at those individuals who are aged 18 plus, as is with the military status. And because of this, it should equal the sum of 2D through 2J. Health insurance sources is compared to the number of individuals reported under 5B health insurance, yes. The C9 total should at least equal the 5B yes total, but will most likely be greater than it. However, none of the specific insurance types, such as reported under 5C1 through 5C8, should be greater than what's reported under 5B health insurance, yes. Other sources of income, which is question 14, is compared to the sum of households reported under D13B, D13C, D13E, and D13F. And you see the commonality between those? There's other income sources listed in those four options. None of the specific other sources of income reported under, none of the specific other sources of income reported under 14A through O should be greater than the sum of households reported as receiving income from other sources under question 13. So basically, what's reported under 14, each individual trait should not be greater than, but can equal the sum of D13B, D13C, D13E, and D13F. Non-cash benefits, which is questions 15, is compared to the sum of households reported under D13C, D13D, D13F, and D13H. So the commonality between those four is non-cash benefits is identified as a source of income. None of the specific non-cash benefits reported under 15A through K should be greater than the sum of households reported as receiving non-cash benefits under 13. Again, the number of households being reported as having received non-cash benefits would be the sum of D13C, D13D, D13F, and D13H. There are 5 NPIs that have subsets. We can also refer to those as children and a parent. FMPIs 2C, 2D, and 5I use auto-calculated logic, whereas FNPIs 1H and 6A use cannot exceed logic. As it uses auto-calculated subset logic, FNPI 2C is the sum of what is reported under 2C1 through 2C3. Please remember that this applies to columns 1 through 3. Additionally, there is a connection between 2C1 and ages 0 through 5 reported on the All Characteristics Report. The logic is the 2C1 should not exceed Module 4, Section C's 2A. Similar to, thank you, sorry. Similar to 2C, this uses the sum requirement and the age connection. FNPI 5I is similar to 2C and 2D, where it's the sum of the two subsets. So the difference here is there's only two subsets, but 2D and 2C have 3. There's also an age connection with this one. 5I1 refers to individuals age 14 through 17, or 2C on Section C. And 5I2 refers to individuals age 18 plus, or the sum of 2D through 2J on Section C. Again, the logic is that the children should not exceed the demographic total. Now, FNPI 1H is not a summation. Rather, it uses the cannot exceed logic. This means that none of the subsets 1H1 through 1H3 can exceed the number reported under 1H. It can equal, but it should never be more than. And this applies to columns 1 through 3. 6A is similar to 1H, whereas none of the subsets can exceed the parent. Some data points require multiple information before they're considered complete. For example, modules 2, C3B12 and C3L require a description, a CFDA number, and a money amount, whereas C4N requires a description and a money amount. So in order for it to be considered complete, all 3 or all 2 pieces of information will be required. Related to the subset conversation that we just had a few slides ago, it is important to keep in mind that if the parent is completed, then at least one child or subset is completed too. This is also true in the reverse, that if at least one child is completed, then the parent must also be completed. Some data points use an if-then logic to determine completeness. For example, if other is selected under Module 2A4, then a description must be included in the below please specify other section. The same logic applies to Module 2B4M and the Z indicators under Module 4, Section A, as you can see on the screen. And I do believe I'm turning it back over to Monique.
Thank you, Tiffany. There's a lot of letters and data points, and you did a great job of keeping them all. They can sometimes be tongue twisters. Another quick knowledge pop. Using what Tiffany has just shared, what is wrong with the data that you see on your screen? We have option A, which nothing's wrong. It looks perfect. Option B, the summation of individuals served for 6A.1 plus 6A.2 plus 6A3 exceeds 6A. Option C, for 6A2, the target exceeds the individual served. Or for option D, for 6A3, the individual served and actual results exceed 6A. I will give a little bit more time so you can read the data figures and provide your answer in the chat. See, one answer came in. I'll give about 30 more seconds. See them starting to trickle in. We'll give it about 5 more seconds. And then I will reveal the answer. For those of you who chose D, you are correct. The individual served and the actual results exceed 6A. And as Tiffany explained, these are a parent-child, so they cannot exceed 6A, but they do not need to add up to 6A. Again, the validations that Tiffany went over are highly recommended. Build what you can, but do a manual check for the others. And the resources can be found in the vendor portal, which we'll share the link and the password again in a few moments. Tiffany will now go over the vendor portal.
Okay, thank you. So on NASCAS's website, we have a vendor portal. You see it in the chat and you'll see it on the slide here. It is password protected, so it's very important to make note of this. There is no username, there's just a password. What is included under the vendor portal is the data dictionary that we talked about. It's a more extensive document that provides a lot more information. We have copies of the XML and XSD schema and the smart forms for the current year. We also have additional fields, which are the header rows for the current year. And then we have the data validations that are going to be used during the federal data quality review. So the first thing is the data dictionary. It's, like I said, very long compared to the other documents because it contains a lot of information that you need to know in terms of how to program a database as well as how to create the XML file. So it talks about, if there's character limits to a text file, or what format does the number have to be, or the number or the format that the date has to be. So it's important to note that some numbers do allow decimals, some do not. This will be defined in this document. Some text boxes will allow 100 characters and some will only allow 10. So it's important. Some of the data elements, especially like the money and other numeric, have a minimum, and then they have a maximum that cannot exceed. So it's important to keep those in mind. And it also helps provide what data fields are added together to come up with those auto sums. Now, the next document is our validation document. It is an Excel file. And what it does is it lists what errors are that will be flagged and what warnings will be flagged. So we made some few changes to this document from previous years, where you see the red items are the warnings, are the errors, and the orangish yellowish color, orange, I guess, is the ones that are warnings. So just kind of a reminder that warnings are saying that just take a second look at the data, whereas an error is saying something that is wrong. And so I just want to point out that we realize that it may not be something that the vendors can add into their systems now, but we're just sharing with you what is being used during the federal review. So anything that you can program, great. Or if you're a state, being able to do these checks manually as well is another option, just to make sure that there are no submission errors, there's no data that's missing, the data is not outside of the acceptable range limit, the dependent data point is not larger than the primary data point, and the year-to-year checks where there's a significant difference between the current and previous year. And another change I just wanted to highlight in this is we have created some categories, and that we have updated the action required language. We're adding specificity where it's needed to help the agency and the state know what really needs to be addressed. And we've added a few new validations, but not really many. I'm sorry, we're not really adding any. We're just now putting them onto the document, the ones that are already in use. So we're not adding new validations. We're just putting them all that are being used on that. Okay, now we can go to the next one. I'm sorry. So we have two schemas. One is the XML and one is the XSD. So the XSD provides information on the name of each XML element and what type of element it is. And then the XML schema is the actual file that will be uploaded into OLDC and contains data from the agency. So there's no changes from FY23. It's going to look exactly the same as in FY24. Another thing in the vendor portal are unprotected smart forms and where these are provided so that you can see what validations and what information is being added to the smart forms. So it relies on macros, and if not open correctly, it's not going to function correctly. It has built-in data validation, conditional formatting, and locked auto-calculated cells to help with data entry. And as again, we're providing an unprotected version to the states that have state systems. However, the states that use smart forms, they will receive a protected form. And that just basically means they can't make any changes to the auto calculation files, any formatting. So it's just important for the smart forms to work properly. They should be the protected if they're using smart forms. And another document is the additional fields. This is the header rows for the XML. As you can see, we have a screenshot on the screen. There are 9 header fields. Again, just want to repeat that the state name is not used on the XML. It's only the grantee name is, but the state name is on there for organization purposes. And we did make a few slight tweaks from last year to this year. We've changed the XML name to being specifically to what is on the XML. And the DUNS was removed and replaced with the UEI, of course, and that was actually in FY23. And the subgrantee was added, which is that column I was telling you that we have to have 1 on the XML. And just remember the XML must be exact as it's listed here, or there will be issues with OLD submission. And I'm turning it back over for Monique. Over to Monique.
Thank you, Tiffany. In the action transmittal, we detailed 3 categories of resources: tools, training, and technical assistance. The tools are the tangibles and things you need to get done. The training are dynamic conversations we review with clear objectives. Technical assistance is the homework, how you may be applying the knowledge of PEAK, and how it can help you better use that information. Our goal is to see you all win and succeed. I'll go through each one of these. Please note the important links referenced here. From the Office of Community Services Block Grant homepage, you can access your CSBG Annual Report Toolkit, the CSBG Events Calendar, and the CSBG Webinars by scrolling to the bottom of the page and dropping down grant recipient resources. You will then be able to access the applicable links and resources as noted in the bottom photo. If you need any additional support, please reach out as soon and as often as possible. The CSBG Annual Report Toolkit is available now and updated regularly. This has available tools for Module 1, as well as other materials. The vendor portal, again, is hosted on the NASCAS website as part of the OCS funded cooperative agreement. The vendor portal is specific to those grant recipients that use a third-party system to submit their data. The webinar on this is the webinar covering this tool. And then lastly, the online data collection system is where all grant recipients, states, tribes, and territories must submit their complete annual report. Upcoming trainings can be found via our CSBG Events calendar page. There are several upcoming webinars that will be shared on the next slide. You can also access on-demand webinars that have been recorded and saved on the link provided in the chat. On the left side, you can see that we held 5 webinars, which were focused on understanding the CSBG Annual Report for performance. We are now focused on leveraging systems and tools for annual report submissions. including today's webinar, which is focused on using state systems for reporting. And there are 2 additional webinars coming up on December 5th and December 9th. The next webinar, the December 5th webinar, is focused on, but it is focused on smart forms, and it is intended for state, territories, and eligible entities utilizing smart forms for the submission of modules 2 and 4. This webinar will review common technical issues with smart forms, strategies to troubleshoot, and best practices for timely submission. Advanced registration is required, and the link is available in the CSBG Events calendar. If you need technical assistance, please feel free to reach out to your program specialist, as well as your data and evaluation specialist. I'm the data and evaluation specialist for regions 4, 6, and 7. We also have 2 open office hours on March 4th and March 6th, 2025. And then if you need targeted training and technical assistance, please email your data and evaluation specialist, and we will work to set that up for you. I also want to share Tiffany Jarvis's information. Again, she's the research director at NASCAS, and her email is tjarvis@nascas.org. Thank you so much for joining.